Jelani, I was a ghost in my own home. My brother, Femi, was the family's golden child, a quick mind with a bright future. My sister, Adana, was celebrated for her beauty. I was just the quiet one. My hands were slow, my feet were always tripping. My family saw my quietness as a weakness. A problem they couldn't fix. Jelani, the words were poison. They seeped into my skin and settled in my bones. He will bring nothing to this family. His mind is as empty as a dry well. My uncle, Papa Jide, always had the sharpest tongue. He told everyone my existence was an accident, a joke from the gods. The laughter that followed his jokes was a heavy chain around my neck. Jelani, it all came to a head at my cousin Musa's wedding. Musa, the doctor, the family's pride. I was just trying to be invisible. But Papa Jide made sure no one could ignore me. He held his hands up, and his voice cut through the music. "Look at our Jelani," he shouted. "He has no work, no future. He will die as empty as he was born." Jelani, in that moment, the pain turned to fire. I made a promise to the earth beneath my feet. I would not return until I had a story to tell. A story that would make them speechless. Jelani, the city was a monster with 1,000 hungry mouths. I had 100 naira from my mother, and the memory of my uncle's words. That was it. My first home was a corner on a street, my first meal was leftovers from a food stand. I worked on a construction site, my body aching and my hands bleeding. The city gave me nothing for free, Jelani. I learned to read the city. I saw the patterns. Food arrived late. It sat in the heat, spoiling. Farmers in the villages worked so hard but got little for their labor. The city people paid too much for old vegetables. The problem was not the food, it was the broken path between the farm and the table. I saw a hole in the system. A chance. Jelani, I took all the money I had and went to an old woman, Mama Ngozi, who sold food at the market. I told her my plan to get fresh produce from the farms to the city before anyone else. She looked at me, a boy with nothing, and gave me a small loan. Her kindness was a key to a new life. My first truck was a rusty old vehicle, but it was mine. It was the first step on the path to my kingdom. Jelani, one truck became 2. 2 became 5. My name started to be known not for failure, but for speed and quality. The memory of my family's words was still with me, but it was no longer a weight. It was a fuel. Jelani, I stepped out of the car. The silence was louder than any music. My parents were there. My brother Femi. And Papa Jide. His face was a sight to behold. He had no words. His mouth was open, but nothing came out. He just stared at me, the boy he had mocked, now a man he couldn't even look in the eye. Jelani, I came back to give this village something they have always lacked. Not money, but purpose. My company will build a school here, where no child will ever be called nothing. We will build a clinic so our people can be healthy. This is my true kingdom. One built not on pride, but on a promise to myself. Jelani, the greatest victory is not proving them wrong. It's knowing that their opinion no longer matters. Jelani, if this story of resilience resonated with you, please hit the like and share buttons. Subscribe to my channel for more inspiring African stories that will make you believe in yourself. It was a curse whispered behind cupped hands, a title given to me long before I had a chance to earn one. They called me a nothing. My name is Jelani, but for the first 2 decades of my life, my name was nothing more than a tag on a tool they deemed useless. I was the last child, a surprise, and in my family, a surprise was not always a blessing. My brother, Femi, was a scholar, his head filled with books and numbers. He was their shining light. My sister, Adana, was the village beauty, her grace celebrated in every dance. I was just the shadow that followed them. The one who stumbled, who spoke softly, who seemed to fit nowhere. My hands, meant to be strong and sure, were clumsy. I could not tie a knot that held, and my legs, meant for running, were always tripping over roots. My family saw this not as a physical problem, but as a flaw in my very soul. They believed I was a child with no direction, a hollow vessel. My father, a good man, often looked at me with a silent pity that was more painful than any insult. My mother, God bless her, would sneak me extra food and whisper prayers for me, but even she seemed to have lost faith in my potential. The most cutting words, the ones that became the fuel for my journey, came from my uncle, Papa Jide. He was a man of great reputation and sharp wit. He never missed a chance to make a joke at my expense, a joke that everyone else found hilarious. "Look at Jelani," he would say, "the gods must have been sleeping when they sent him. He has a body, but no spirit." The laughter that followed his jokes was a physical blow. It was the laughter of people who were so sure of my insignificance that they felt no need to hide their contempt. I carried the weight of that laughter everywhere I went. It was a chain around my neck, a brand on my back. It told me, over and over again, that I was not worthy of a seat at the table. My cousin Musa's wedding was supposed to be a day of celebration, a time for family to come together in happiness. But for me, it was the final act of a long, cruel play. Musa was the golden boy, a doctor, the pride of our clan. Everyone wanted a piece of him, to shake his hand, to bask in his success. I just wanted to be invisible. I sat alone on a low bench, eating a small plate of rice, hoping that in the sea of people, I would be forgotten. But Papa Jide, my own personal tormentor, had other plans. He walked through the crowd, his smile wide, his eyes scanning for me. When he found me, he clapped his hands for attention. All eyes were on him, and then on me. He held his hands up, a showman on a stage. "Look at our Jelani," he boomed, his voice reaching every corner of the compound. "He eats like a king, but he has no kingdom. His name means mighty, but he is as useful as a broken hoe." The words hit me like a physical punch. I felt the hot blush of shame crawl up my neck. A wave of laughter, sharp and merciless, rippled through the crowd. It was not just my uncle laughing, it was everyone. My parents, my siblings, my cousins. I looked at my father, and his face was filled with pity. I looked at my brother, and he looked away. In that moment, something inside me broke. But what broke was not my spirit. It was the chains that had held me for so long. The tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard fire ignited in my heart. A fire fueled by every insult, every whispered doubt, every mocking laugh. I stood up, slowly. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a quiet, building rage. I placed my half-eaten plate on the ground. I didn't look at anyone. I just walked. I walked away from the celebration, from the laughter, from the only home I had ever known. And as I walked, I made a silent promise to myself, a vow to the ancestors and to the very earth beneath my feet, I would not return until I was a man they could not dismiss. I swore I would build a kingdom, not for them, but for the boy who had been told he was nothing. That walk was the first step of my true journey. The city was a beast with 1,000 mouths and 1,000,000 teeth. Lagos. It was a monster of steel and concrete, roaring with horns and shouting voices. It swallowed people whole and spit out what it couldn't use. I had a small bag with a few worn clothes and 100 naira my mother had secretly pressed into my hand. My entire life was 100 naira and a burning resolve. The first few weeks were a relentless cycle of hunger and despair. I slept on the streets, my head on my bag, and I could have used this moment for revenge. I could have robbed my success in their faces. But I didn't. That would have made me just like them. I looked at Papa Jide, his head bowed, his eyes on the ground. He had nothing to say. He didn't need to. His silence was my victory. I took a deep breath, And I said the words that had been burning inside me for a decade. I didn't do this for you. I did it for me. I didn't do it for their respect. I did it for the boy who had been told he was nothing. I did it to show myself that a boy with a fumbling hand and a quiet voice could build a kingdom out of nothing but an idea. I turned away from my family and looked at the village. I saw the true purpose of my journey. The village that had once shamed me was now a place I could help. I announced my plans: a new school for the children, a new clinic, a new well. I would not let any child ever feel the shame that I had felt. This was my true kingdom, a kingdom built not on wealth, but on purpose and a promise. The final victory was not in their respect, but in my emotional freedom. I was finally free.